Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Want to steal a phone? Better grab it next time and don't forget your keys, or car." So this wasn't me but happened at one of the retail cell phone stores I manage a few hours ago. We put out demo phones for customers to play with. The funny thing about these phones is that they are locked, cannot be used, and have no real value. From time to time, a dumb thief will come in the stores and take one of these phones. Today was one of those times. This particular store is usually slow, so having one or two employees working at a time is normal. Today one was at lunch, so only one employee was in the store. In walk two guys. One is engaging with the employee, asking questions, acting as an interested buyer. The second is looking at the demo phones, but in reality, is taking it off the security stand. The employee notices the guy has removed the demo phone from the security device and turns to look at him. The thief makes a run towards the door, and unbelievably, the employee tackles the thief. The two roll around exchanging blows outside the store. It was a completely crazy scene. The good part about all this is that the thief got away with the phone, but in the process of wrestling with the employee, dropped his car keys out of his pocket. The employee picked up the car keys and went inside the store, locked the door, and called the police. To keep a long story short, the cops came and towed the thief's 2016 Honda Accord. So he got a play phone that is as good as worthless and lost a good car. Also, the cops were easily able to identify the thief and put a warrant out for his arrest. The next one is titled, "Pull a Prank on a Wonderful Old Lady." You got another thing coming. For backstory, this story isn't mine. It's my grandpa's. Since he died before I was born, this has just been one of those family stories that I've heard since I was a little girl. My family has a lot of those, which I may tell if I find the willpower to do so. But it may not be 100% what happened, but the main points where a bully got covered in poop are: my grandpa grew up in rural Iowa. I'm not gonna say where exactly, but Iowa is basically all cornfields anyway, so you probably got a mental image in your head already. He was always a stand-up guy, and despite this happening over 70 years ago at this point, you can still hear people speak very highly of the Boy Scout of a man that my grandpa was. I sincerely wish I knew him. At this point, my grandpa was in his junior year of high school, and despite being well loved in his community, he had his bully. Everyone has that one bully. His bully though just seemed to be a dick to everyone. Teachers, parents, kids, hell, there was even a small town cop fresh to the force who got bullied at one point, which would probably go under entitled people if I make another post about when I ended up meeting his craphead. No one seemed to stand up to this stupid little high schooler that thought he knew everything. It got to the point where he'd go out of his way to brag about it to people. This did not sit right with my grandpa, but he didn't really know how to stand up to him without making things worse when it came to how he was being bullied. But one day, mistakes were made. My grandpa was getting a pop at a gas station with his friends, and this particular gas station had a restaurant attached, since it was a good spot for people to pass through, on road trips or for a truck stop. And in the restaurant was the bully laughing loudly with his little weaselly friends. My grandpa listened, just sipping his drink, and heard that they were going to pull a prank on an elderly woman that owned a farmhouse nearby. This woman's house wasn't in town since her family had built that house long ago and worked the land around it. She was widowed, her children had moved away, and she hired people to help her maintain the place. Despite her age, I've been told that she was still a spitfire and insisted on doing a lot of the farming herself. The main issue with her health was heavy lifting. Anyway, back to the supposed prank. This woman didn't have indoor plumbing, which meant that she got water from a spigot near her house and that she had an outhouse instead of a normal bathroom that we had today. For those of you that aren't entirely aware of how Iowa farm outhouses work, it's basically a big pit in the ground that someone digs, and then they stick a wooden shack on top of it. The shack then has a seat with a hole in it for a person to relieve themselves in. The bullies were going to wait until the dead of night so that they could tip the outhouse over. My grandpa was furious when he heard this. He had been hired before by her for summer work and knew that she was a strict but kind woman that didn't deserve to be treated like that. Because when your only outhouse is tipped over, and you gotta go, there's no way you're gonna be able to lift it, and there's no way to safely crouch next to the hole without falling in. So my grandpa did the right thing and immediately went with his friends to tell the old lady what was being planned. They expected her to be furious when they told her the story, but instead, she sipped her coffee and gave them a chilling smile. Let them, but we'll have a surprise for them. And she let them in on a plan to make sure that things wouldn't go as far as the bullies had planned. That night, my grandpa and his friends, telling their parents that they were at one another's houses to hang out, all gathered at the old woman's house, munching on some cookies and pumpkin bread. My grandpa got the recipe off her, and it's an amazing recipe that my family uses to this day, and waited. At around 11 o'clock, they heard disgusted screams from the direction of the outhouse. You see, the way that the yard was set up was so that there was only one way to get into the yard and still have enough room to take a running start to tip the outhouse over. My grandpa and his friends didn't tip the outhouse over, but they did move it over about 5 feet, and lightly covered the now exposed hole in excess corn stalks from the harvest. The screams were from my grandpa's bully being waist deep in human excrement. The bully's friends were frozen in place by the gate they came in, and the old woman immediately turned on the lights and started yelling that if they didn't get off her property that minute, that she was going to call the police. My grandpa and his friends waited inside and heard the whole thing, laughing when they heard the pitiful cries from the crap pit and the running of feet from the co-conspirators. Wouldn't you know it, he couldn't get out himself, and since he wasn't getting off her property, she called the police. My grandpa and his friends watched from a window as the poop fiend was dragged out of his rancid prison and made to go to the police station to explain just what he was doing. He wasn't an adult, so he wasn't charged, from what I was told, but word got out around the school and his last 2 years of high school were absolute crap. No one knew it was Grandpa, and the old lady never told a soul. Thank you, old lady. May you rest in peace, you wonderful woman. The next one is titled, Use My Dad, and Take Over the House. I'll move you out myself. I'm an only son. My mum died of ovarian cancer at only 55 5 years ago. It broke my dad's heart. They had been together since college and were the same age, with my dad being a month older. I'm 22 and I'm about to graduate college with my degree in chemistry when the main events start to occur. I went to college on a full-ride scholarship. This is important later. My dad met my now stepmom when she was my mum's nurse at the hospital where she spent her final days. My stepmom, Grace, played all the right notes to gain my dad's trust. She was empathetic to him, nurturing, comforting after my mum passed. I was 17 and old enough to sense that she was just trying to weasel her way into getting my dad's resources, but it was up to my dad if he wanted to be in a relationship with her. I was in my final year of public school and had just won a scholarship to attend college out of the country the following year. My dad mourned my mum for a year, and that whole time Grace would check in on him by phone every month or so, in my opinion, to scope out the possibility of sinking her hooks in him. After a year passed, Grace took the gloves off and went hard after my dad. Grace was only 40 when she and my dad started seeing each other. I didn't like her, but at the same time my dad at least didn't seem so depressed anymore, so I tried to be less pessimistic about her and give her the benefit of the doubt. In my gut, I didn't trust her, though. But we are Scandinavian, and at least in my family, the son does not tell his father what to do or even offer any opinion. Grace is from the Czech Republic, if you're wondering. My father was a very successful banker during his career and amassed quite a portfolio of wealth. I'll spare you the details, but after 6 months of dating, Grace and my father are married. My dad never really got over my mum though, and he was getting weaker and weaker even though he was only 57. Since his health was fading, he called me to him and asked me point blank, "Boy, what do you need to set you up in this life?" I told him I don't need anything, I'm a man and can take care of myself, but what are you even talking about, Dad, you're going to be around for decades yet. I did remind him that he had living sisters with children, my aunts and cousins. I also reminded him that I had a full scholarship to college, so don't worry about giving me any cash. He was dead only a year later at 59. I, of course, have seen lots of Hollywood movies, so I consider the conspiracy theory that maybe my dad's nurse wife poisoned him and made him sign over all his money to her, but I really honestly do not think that's what happened. Other relatives didn't like Grace either, but they knew my dad was totally in love with my mum and that her death utterly broke him. Well, long story short, my dad bequeathed his 5-bedroom house to me even though I wasn't expecting it and didn't ask for it. He gave a small endowment to each of his sisters and their children. He left about 80% of all his existing money to Grace, which amounted to several hundreds of thousands of dollars. My dad ignored me because he's generous to a fault and still gave me several tens of thousands of dollars, which were of course very useful to me. Grace tried to put on a friendly front, but I could tell she was angry as hell that she didn't get my dad's house, too. That belonged to me, and I had the legal papers to prove it. She was especially mad because we live in an extremely upscale and trendy location, and houses are hard to come by and easily sold for massive profit. During the first few months after my dad's death, I had the nauseating, creepy experience of knowing that Grace was trying to feel me out to see if I might be into a little relationship with her. Gross. She still stayed at the house though, because over the last 3 years she had gotten used to living there and acting as though she owned it. And, even though I officially owned it, I was always away at college and only visited my dad's old house once every couple of months, and even then it wasn't to see Grace but to see my cousins who lived just a few miles away. I downplayed the fact that it was really my house, and over the months I think Grace gradually forgot that she really had no legal right to the house. She probably believed that sooner or later, because I never asked her for any of the hundreds of thousands of my dad's dollars that she now had, that I was somehow independently wealthy and would just give up my house to her. I knew I'd eventually hydrogen bomb this witch when she started dating some new guy only 5 months after my dad was in the ground, and one time when I came home from college after graduating, she and her new boyfriend, some sleazy-looking douchebag named Ivan, who was only a few years older than me, were acting like I was a guest in my own house and that they owned it. I played along. Grace told me she gave away my PlayStation 4 to Ivan's cousin because I'm too old to play with video games. I don't even know this motherfucker and you give him my PS4 to give away to some other crap who I also don't know? I quickly changed all my network passwords that same day. I smiled, but I knew what I had to do eventually. She also said that she and Ivan were getting married because I just can't mourn your father forever. I have to move on with life. I tell her that I graduated from college and already secured employment with a local firm, and will soon find a new place to live. She looks thrilled. Especially the part where it looks like I'll soon have a new place to live. Then in a patronizing way she tells me, "You always have a place in our house though, you are welcome to stay whenever you please." Thanks, Grace, really generous of you. What I really say is that I will probably have a new place in 3 months. She says that is wonderful because she intends to go to her homeland to have a wedding with Ivan and afterward have her honeymoon. She assures me it's a local affair, otherwise I'd invite you, honey. And anyway, I know you're so busy. I congratulate her. She asks me if I can watch the house for her. Watch my own house? Sure. What I really say is, of course, I will take care of the house. I am careful to not say, your house. She and her douchebag fiancé, who I am 100% sure is only there for Grace's money, go on their trip and I immediately put out advertisements in rental websites offering to lease my house. I hire movers and have all of Grace's furniture and possessions boxed up and put into a storage rental facility. I retain all of my parents' furniture that they had before my dad met Grace. Locks? Changed. All of them. Within days, I am inundated with dozens of inquiries regarding my amazing, furnished house with fantastic views. I rent it to a wonderful young family. A barrister and his schoolteacher wife and their 2 preteen children. They pay me their first and last month's rent and sign a lease for a year. I warn them about my crazy stepmom who thinks this is her house, but I present them with contact information to my lawyer, the same lawyer my dad retained, in case they need any assurance that I'm on the level. I also give my lawyer the information about the storage facility, including the fact that I generously paid 4 months of storage in advance, which is a whole month longer than Grace's Czech honeymoon adventure. I then found a great apartment in the city near my new place of work. There I met a woman in a restaurant I frequent at night after a long workday. We have been dating 6 months now and are engaged to be married. Grace, of course, tried to shriek and cause trouble when she realized she got kicked out of my house, but my lawyer quickly shut her mouth without my having to ever speak to her garbage face again. From what I hear, she and her trash husband left the country, and I assume they're blowing through my dad's money and will soon be broke like chavs usually become when they taste a little bit of what they think is a good life. So maybe Grace will go and try to exploit some other lonely man into giving her his money. Speaking of money, the house that I rent out is generating so much money that I not only am able to help pay for my cousin's college, but I moved into a larger apartment of my own, together with my fiancée. I love my job, but really, I could survive solely on renting my dad's old house. And to think, if Grace had only been cooler and nicer, I might have let her stay at the house, just to be a good sport. And definitely, if she stayed the hell out of my room. But no, she had to act all proprietary, so I had to make her homeless as a wedding gift. Postscript. I bought another PS4, even though I didn't even use my old one that much. It didn't matter. It wasn't for Grace to give away. You don't give away other people's things. You give away your own things. Which is why I chose to kick Grace out of my house. Because it's mine, and I decide who stays there. The last one is titled, "Refuse to Pay Me." I'm getting $5,000 out of you. All over failing to pay his employee $275, should have just done the right thing, dude. I consider myself a decent person and an above-average employee. I worked for a medical office directly under a doctor for almost 2 years and was consistently facing issues with him from the start. He was aloof, unhelpful, and didn't want to train or help establish protocol. He just wanted me to run everything and take the fall for anything that went wrong. He was married with children but flirted and slept with numerous patients and staff members. This isn't unheard of in this field, so I often just kept my nose down and tried to do my best at my job regardless of his after-hour activities. Problems started to arise more and more, though, as he hired people based on looks and his attraction to them versus their qualifications to do the job. I tolerated a lot of BS, but the last straw was when he wanted me to do some somewhat illegal activities financially, and when I refused, the games began. I could sense that he was unhappy with my unwillingness to do whatever he wanted me to willy-nilly, but didn't think he was upset enough to justify punishing me or trying to get rid of me in any way. Then literally all hell broke loose after a minor procedure I had him do for me. We were in good standing, or so I thought, and I thought nothing of having him do it at the time. What sucked royally is that he botched my procedure and caused permanent damage. That wasn't even the worst part, the way he dealt with it was. Instead of apologizing and offering to make it right, to which I'm pretty understanding and would have accepted, he denied anything was even wrong or had happened under his care. He went into total cover-butt mode and methodically started to try to get rid of me without firing me, as it would definitely be wrongful termination, and the tension was becoming unbearable more and more each day. I was hoping he would make it right, and we could move on, but instead, every day was full of scrutiny of my choices and work, and even a write-up for a minor offense that I had no prior warning about. I could see the writing on the wall and realized he was going to wash his hands of me as quickly as possible to preserve his precious reputation, which I could definitely disrupt now with his mistake with me. I noticed shortly after, while on a planned vacation, he was advertising for my job. I decided to quit then and there instead of being fired. I was trying to fix the botch prior to quitting and hoping he would help financially. Nope, not gonna happen. I told him I was quitting, and since we were under very abnormal circumstances, that I would not be offering my typical 2-week notice. He was upset. He was late with my last paycheck, in which he sent a snide letter telling me he was done with me and my care with him. I noticed that the check was short for 2 sick days I had taken after the botch. We are talking around $275, but it was still enough money that I felt rightly owed. I had a ton of sick pay left and didn't even give it a second thought until now, and thought maybe he just forgot to add it. Nope, he responded curtly saying I hadn't accumulated enough time to pay for the days. I asked to see proof of that because I knew I had enough time. He changed the accumulation date to another month and said tough luck, he wasn't going to pay. I told him blatantly that this was wrong and that I would have to report it to the labor board if he couldn't show me proof. He just bullied me back and insisted it is what he says it is, and again, tough luck. He even said to quit contacting him about it, or he would report me for harassment to law enforcement. So, I went to the labor board. I brought in my contract and asked them about numerous questionable offenses. They couldn't believe how many skewed things were actually going on that I had accepted because I didn't know or he had convinced me otherwise. They had me file for all of the offenses and said they would send us both a letter letting us know the mediation date. I got the letter in the mail from the labor board and almost fell over dead right then there. What was originally a $275 offense with the other minor claims and now penalties added from the labor board, the total was now $6,500. I laughed hysterically and couldn't believe it at first. I thought about him receiving the same letter that day and just reveled at the thought admittedly. Keep in mind, he didn't know at this point that I had actually gone to the labor board as I promised. He didn't think I would do it. He thought he had won up to this point. Mediation day rolls around, and he sits across from me with the mediator there and is steaming under the pressure now. We both share our sides, which he lied about numerous things, of course, and then we talk separately with the mediator. She explains to me that my case may be hard to prove, being somewhat he said or she said. She encourages me to kind of take whatever he offers. Before leaving the room with her, I bring up one more thing to her that I was unsure of and didn't ask about before. It involved him not paying overtime, and she lit up like a damn Christmas tree. Bingo. With that type of offense and me being able to show verifiable proof, he would have to pay the penalties starting at $6,000 and whatever the judge added after that. She went and told him of this new claim, and he fumed out of the building saying, I shouldn't be able to add anything at this point, not the case at all, and that he needed to speak with his lawyer. I get a new claim in the mail with the added offense weeks later. The total is now $9,600. I die again laughing and just bask in the thought of him getting this new claim. There was no contact from him this whole time, but now, suddenly, there is an email sent to me in the sweetest tone I've ever heard him speak. He pleaded with me that he never meant to withhold anything from me and that he would like to settle all this peacefully outside of the court. Of course he would, I thought to myself. I forwarded the email to our mediator and told her that I did not want to respond and asked her to deal with him and let him know I wanted to continue the no contact he requested earlier. Weeks go by, and we are creeping closer to a court date. Suddenly, the offer rolls in at $4,000, and he will settle. I was set on $5,000 because of all the hassle I had to go through up to this point. I tell the mediator to tell him, no, $6,000. Silence for another week or two. Then the offer of $5,000 comes. That was my number, so I waited a couple of days just to shake him up a bit more, and the mediator let him know I'd accept it. I received the payoff within a week and then I got to wash my hands of him in the end. He thought he could cheat me and bully me as I'm sure he has gotten away with it in the past. I gave him a swift lesson that could have just cost him $275 to do the right thing. Instead, I went shopping and bought shoes and an expensive leather jacket. Now, I'm going on a vacation to Hawaii and will sip a Mai Tai on his dime for trying to take back what I had rightfully earned and more. Thanks for listening.